All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Wow, does it feel good to be back, huh? Feels good to be in person. I want to thank you all for joining us today for the 2022 Destination Compliance. My name is Bailey Tennyson. I am from the Kansas City region, and I am your special education compliance consultant. We do have some compliance consultants all across our regions in the Missouri area. So if you are a Missouri special education compliance consultant, can you please stand up so everybody can see who you are? All right, there they are. Your special education compliance consultants are here as a resource for you today. So if you have questions, they are going to be located at your tables, and they'll be walking around to make sure that you are getting any questions answered. We also have our amazing improvement consultants here today. If you're an improvement consultant with an RPDC, can you please stand up? Thank you. We also want to welcome them as well. They do anything and everything with effective practices of special education. We are so grateful that they are here today to assist us. Once again, if you have questions, they are another great resource for you. And last but not least, we have our DESE supervisors and directors of compliance. If you are a DESE supervisor or director of compliance, please stand up and be recognized really quickly. The reason that I want you guys to make sure that you see who these people are is because we are real people. We do want to help you. You are not alone in this process as we get started with the 22-23 school year. So please know that if you have questions today and throughout your entire school year, we are here to help you. Before we get started, I do want to do a couple housekeeping things. If you are sitting at a back table, please come forward and sit with your region. We are trying to get you guys to network and get to know one another. Also, we have our compliance and improvement consultants that can help you answer questions. So if you do not know where your region is, please raise your hand and one of our consultants would be happy to help you. The next item on the list is Wi-Fi. If you want to join the Wi-Fi today, the Wi-Fi is MoDESE. And the password is secure123 capital S. So once again, Wi-Fi is MoDESE, and the password is secure123, and secure is with a capital S. We are trying to go a little greener here in special ed because we like to kill not only trees but whole forests with paperwork. So we are trying to help you guys out. On your tables, you will see a big orange folder, and it says Destination Transition on it. On that folder, you'll see a QR code. That QR code has a Google folder of resources for you. This is something that will be given to you. You have access to it. On that Google folder, you will find that there is transition IEP examples. There is an Ed O'Leary Transition Services wonderful document for you. We also have the Indicator 13 checklist that we'll be referring to, along with a couple other things as we go along. If you're not one that likes QR codes, I also provided the web link below it. So you can also just type in your computer, tinyurl.com/transitionrocks. And so that is another way to get to that Google folder, and you can save it on your laptop or electronic device. All right. So I am a firm believer in getting up and moving. When I found out that I had to be at a podium, I about freaked out because I am not one for standing in front of people and doing the speeches like this. So we're going to play a little game. Our compliance consultants have a paper that they're going to be passing out to your tables. And on this, you're going to look for your neighbor's preferences. Sound interesting with transition? You're going to collect information about the people sitting around you, what their interests are. You're going to visit with at least 10 people, and each time you find somebody with an interest that matches your paper, you're going to have them write down their name. Once you have 10 different people, once your paper is filled, you're going to yell out, Destination Transition. And if you are one of the top 10, you get a goodie bag up here. And I know you all like prizes. I already saw some of your guys' faces. So we played this fun little game earlier with compliance. I have to say I was the winner. Yes, I am big on that. And I did not win a goodie bag, so I'm kind of jealous that you guys are at least getting a prize. Yes, if you do not have a paper, please raise your hand, and we'll make sure to get you some. We have some in the front and the side over here. Now, don't get going just yet. So this is a get up and move activity. You'll notice there's not 10 people at your table. So you're going to have to get up and move and find some other people. Get to know your table mates and your people around you. All right, on your mark, get set, go. We got one winner already. Woo! Where are you from?
Willard.
We got one from Willard, one from Chillicothe. Woo woo! Nope. Come up and see me if you get one. All right, where are you from? Lafayette County.
Thank you.
We got Willard. All right. St. Joseph. Woo woo! 5 bags to go. Oh, we got another. Where are we from? Knobnoster. 4 bags. Who's going to win? Oh, we got another winner. Come on down. Oh, Stacy Mathis from Lee Summit. Thank you.
1, 2 more.
We got 2 more.
3, that's it.
All right, we're done. We got them. St. Joe, Farmington. We got no more. Lee Summit, I'm sorry. Good job, Missouri Department of Corrections, but we're out. Cameron, all right. All right, please have a seat. You guys move quick. I tell you what, I love when we have prizes. It doesn't matter if it's candy or a pin. What you guys do for a prize is amazing sometimes. Great job, everybody. Thank you for participating. Thank you for getting to know the people around you and hopefully some others within your area. So the real reason we're here today is we want to discuss how we prepare students with disabilities for life after high school. So that is our big topic for conversation. And let's go ahead and get started. You got to learn some of your interests and strengths of the people sitting around you, but I want you to also talk to your table about your role in special education, because you're going to get to be around these people for the next 3 hours. So what is your role in special education? We're going to give you about 1 minute. Introduce yourself to your table. Tell them your role. Please be a listener as well to others, okay? So just tell everybody what's going on with your role right now. So go for it. So many of us play different roles within transition, but it's not just for students with disabilities. So today we'll be talking about a more in-depth role that we are required by law to play in transition planning with students with disabilities. So this is a very, very important topic and one that's very near and dear to our hearts in compliance. We do have some norms I just want to briefly touch on. It's the AEIOU. Ask questions. You have your consultants here. We want to answer them today. Please be engaged. I know that it is easy to get on phones, look at Facebook, do some Amazon shopping. That's usually what I'm doing when I'm sitting there. But try and be engaged. That's the way we get the most out of this. Integrate this new information. Have an open mind to some different views. We may say something today that you may not have heard of. Have an open mind to it. And then also, utilize what you're learning. Think about 2 or 3 things that you can take back and we can really work on for the upcoming school year. So I have one last activity just to get your brains moving. In your folders, you will have 4 different colored note cards. You'll see one that has post-secondary goals, annual goals connected to Form C, age-appropriate assessments, and transition services. These are the major components of transition planning for students with disabilities. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to put these cards on the table and lay them flat. What we want you to look at is which of those colored cards is the most challenging thing for you at this moment for the 22-23 school year. So when you look at those colored cards, think about which one of these areas really resonates with you. And we're going to give you a couple minutes to talk with your table about what you would like to get out of this today. So go ahead, look at those cards, and when you're ready, please have a discussion. All right, I'm going to call on a couple people, just if anybody would like to share out what is challenging for you and why. I'd love to hear from some. I have one from Casey Moe.
One of our challenges is the assessments, the age-appropriate assessments, and for skill level as well. And just finding the time to do it, as well as we have the resource, it's getting people to work smarter instead of harder.
Yeah. So if you didn't hear, she said it's finding the time to do these transition assessments and getting our case managers to work smarter, not harder. Anybody else? Oh, got one from the Rolla area.
So we said the transition services, especially in the past 2 years with COVID and everything, like we can have these services set up or like make these, like allow them to tour colleges and whatnot. But we've made appointments in the past and the night before they call and say, hey, you can't come, sorry, COVID policy. It's just really hard to get those lined up.
Yeah. Getting things lined up with transition services. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable and answering. Anyone else? Coming to you. I'm glad I wore my flats today.
So we talked mostly about post-secondary goals for the reason that every time we talk to students, they've changed their post-secondary goals, and it's hard to keep one plan going.
Yeah. How many of you guys changed what you wanted to be? Did you all want to be a doctor when you first started? I feel like it's doctor, lawyer, teacher. Those are like your 3 main ones at the very beginning of what do you want to be when you grow up? And then it slowly changes. I wanted to be an underwater photographer. Then I realized I'd have to move out of Missouri. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to cut it. Then I kind of thought about psychology. And I thought, psychology would be fun. I get to listen to people's problems. I was all about, wanting to know the dirt on everybody. And then I was like, yeah, that's a lot of school. And then I kind of slowly got introduced to students with disabilities and got to work in a program in Chillicothe, Missouri with one of the state schools. And that's how I ended up in special education. My experiences shifted and shaped where I went. It's okay for people to change their minds. Remember that Form C, transition planning, it is a process, but it's an ongoing process. It is a never-ending process. And it can be a little frustrating as a teacher trying to get these services and skills and assets all lined up for them, and then all of a sudden they no longer want to do underwater photography, and now they want to be a teacher. Completely different set of skills, but at the end of the day, it's their future, right? So, absolutely. Okay, I'm going back up to the microphone. Hold on. Sorry, I left my clicker up here. Okay, so before we begin thinking, think back from when you graduated from college and when you're about to go into that big, bad world and enter your first job and live independently to make your own decisions. Were you ready? Were there skills that you needed to learn? I can tell you right now, I was not ready when I went to college. There were things I didn't know. I didn't understand that you don't put reds with white clothes. Learned that one really fast. Because what happens to your clothes, guys? It turns pink, right? I also didn't know that you shouldn't sign up for credit cards for a free pizza. But I was a hungry college student. I didn't look at the interest rates of that credit card. No one taught me that. I had really good parents too, by the way. But I just didn't learn those things. Thinking about your credit score. Thinking about just how to get on a bus. School, or like a city bus. I was from Chillicothe, Missouri. I never rode a bus before. So when I went to college and had to ride a bus for the first time, I literally went up to the bus driver and just told him where I wanted to go. I didn't know the difference between the different lines. I had no idea. These are skills that I needed to learn, and I didn't have a disability, or at least one that was diagnosed. Okay? So when we're talking today, it's not just about our students with disabilities. This is about all kids. This is about really looking at all of our students and helping them really guide their future. So Lynn's going to talk to us a little bit about the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? You know it's not a good idea to give me a microphone, so let's see what happens. So the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. So the difference is, what's the difference between the letter of the law? Oh, good Lord, I can see myself on there. What's the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law? So develop a plan for providing better post-secondary outcomes for students. So that's what we're supposed to do, right? That's what we're doing this for. And the letter of the law is that indicator 13. That's what was exactly written out on how we were supposed to do it. So it's the legal jargon, right? The letter of the law, and then the spirit of the law is the why we're doing what we're doing, okay? Planning for better post-secondary outcomes for our kids. So what is indicator 13? How many, have you all read that? Anyone? One, Bailey, yes. All right. So if you look in the Google folder, that's the online Google folder, or is it in? It's in the folder on your table. On the QR code. Oh, sorry. QR code. And there's also a handout in there for the indicator 200-800, which includes all of the things. Okay. Clicker? Oh, I thought that would change this one too. Did that work? I have to do two things at once. Now, I'm not going to read this to you because I don't like that when people read things to me. But this is out of indicator 13. And it is just the definition of post-secondary transition. So this recent case law from 20 basically says that we are not relieved of our duty for transition just because we're in a pandemic, all right? So the district was in violation of IDEA because the students weren't able to access those services that they were supposed to do. Okay, many of those districts are, the sites are closed, the districts are closed. And so if we are still responsible for transition, even during a pandemic when everything's closed, then clearly the feds think that this is a super important situation. Many of our colleagues from the Department of Corrections are here, and as a former corrections employee myself, we still do transition planning and training in our Missouri prisons for our students with disabilities under the age of 22. So even in that extreme situation, transition planning is of high importance. Corrections, folks. So there's two ways to view transition, and most of us, like Bailey just said, most of us, when we graduated, what happened? Right? They just kicked us out of the house. Boom. Right? And it really was up to us to see what happened when we got to the end. Some of us, I'm sure, left home. I knew the difference between whites and reds, Bailey. Yep. Okay. So all of us had different experience with whoever taught us our daily life skills, right? We all had different experience with what jobs we had. I learned a whole lot working at the Six Flags in the summertime in St. Louis about people and jobs and that sort of thing. But there are other kids that didn't have that same experience, right? So your experience at McDonald's might have been very different than my experience. But most of us, as people without disabilities, were just on our own pretty much. Now, if you were anything like me, I still called my mother all the time to get a recipe or to do this or how would you do that, right? But not all kids have that. But most of us without disabilities, what we did was we just got punted down the field and nobody really made a plan for us or threw that football, right? But with our kids with disabilities, what we'd like to talk about is that we want to hand them off to the next person because they already have those disadvantages, right? So instead of just punting them down the field or tossing that long ball and seeing what happens, we're going to hand that student off to the next place, to the next agency, to the next caseworker. And we're going to also give them the tools that they need so that they are not just out there without that support. So like a baton in a relay race, we're going to hand them off. And as Ed O'Leary used to say, or maybe still does, I'm not sure, we're not going to let go until somebody else has hold of them. Right? So that is really a lot of why we do what we do with transition. It's not just those skills that we're teaching those students, but it's also that getting those students hooked up or their families hooked up with those agencies that are going to grab onto that baton or grab onto that student and make sure they continue to have that support and the training and all of that comes after we pass that baton on. Okay? So let's look at this. When we start thinking about a student who's getting ready to turn 16, we're looking at that IEP and we're starting to plan for, we have to look at all of these areas. And not just all of these areas like who's going to do what. Who's going to do what for each one of the areas that we are tasked to work on. So what are we tasked to work on? What education they're going to get, what job they are going to do, and what independent living skills, right? How are they going to live independently? So all of the areas that we address are all about who's going to do what. Why are they going to do it? That's going to be in the present level. What skills does the student need? That's why we're doing it. Who's going to help work on that skill? What the skill is, clearly. When are they going to do it? Where are they going to do it? And how are they going to do it? So each one of those areas, when you look at the Missouri form, right, what do we have there? Each of the areas is broken down, what the student's going to do, what the school's going to do, what the parent's going to do, and then we fill out the what and the why and the where. Does that make sense? Yes? So here's a broad definition. Formal process of cooperative planning. So when we do those assessments, formal or informal assessments, we know what the student needs, what the student wants to do, and what the student likes to do. Right? And we're going to plan together cooperatively to assist those students to move from school to adult in all of those areas. And that's part of that IEP process. And the IEP process is a formal process, okay? And so we have to look at all of the areas, the skills that they need, what they want to do, what their strengths are, and all of that, and plan that together. Okay? Sometimes I get ahead of the slide. Employment, training, or education. So these are the basic areas that we look at. And as Bailey brought up, and we've talked about a little bit already, we can't forget those independent living skills. Like Bailey said, all of us had areas that we needed help with, and so I believe that we all kids, not just the lowest of the low kids. Typically, when you're looking at kids, or when we look at IEPs, we see that we're really good at making sure we plan for independent living for those kids that are state school level, or those ones that have the more significant disabilities. But any kid at any disability area, any kid with no disability really, also could have needs in that area. Of course, we always look at self-care. We always look at feeding. We always look at clothing. But we cannot forget those other areas and just automatically say, oh, well, this student's going to live on their own. They won't have independent living skills needs. They quite likely will, just like we all did. Okay? So we need to make sure that we look at all of those things. And I personally think like one of the biggest ones is that self-determination, or the ability to advocate for themselves. Many of us have deficits in that area as young people, so don't ever overlook those independent living skills. So, as we know, transition planning should be past high school, right? What does a student want to do? Begin with the end in mind. What does that student want to do? What education does that student need to have? And where might that student live once they graduate? And we're going to think about what do we need to do to put that into school, right? The student needs to be involved. The student needs to be driving what they want for their life after high school. And our job then is to say, okay, this is what you're good at, this is what you want to do, how can we help you? So that student, it has to be student driven, okay? And it does need to be based on the student's abilities and disabilities. All of us have strengths. All of our students have strengths. Yeah, they have some disabilities and some areas that they need help, but we need to focus on the good as well as the bad and make sure that we focus on the strengths as well as the disability areas so that they can be as successful as possible. And I hope it goes without saying that this form that we fill out for transition is not just a hoop, right? This is probably at the high school level one of the most important things that we do, because it's the beginning of everything that's going to happen after high school. So think about what you do. And does this reflect what you do? Okay? So are we centered on these things? So all of the areas, when we say cooperative or coordinated planning, these are some of the areas that should or likely will be involved. Clearly, the student is at the top. We cannot plan for a student's future if that student is not involved in that process. Clearly, as the school, we're involved in that process. And the parents, as much as we can possibly get them involved, the whole family, might be grandma and grandpa, might be aunt and uncle. Getting that student out into the community, right? What does your community look like? Growing up in Chillicothe, Bailey didn't have a city bus, but there is probably Uber in Chillicothe now. So how might a student do that? What kind of training can that student have to Uber safely? And all of us probably have to think about those things too. And of course, the community support services. What does your county have or your city have to be put in place so that we're handing that baton off to the next agency or the next caseworker or whomever, so that they have hold of them before we let go. So all of it has to be planned, right? One of the things we talk about as compliance folks is we say, don't plan for one of the outside agencies to do anything unless they're there to say, yes, I'll do that. Okay? So we need to have them involved in part of the decision making. We might be the teaching experts, the gen ed teachers are the content experts, but who then are the experts in your community and your county, and what agencies are out there for people as they go into the adult world? And without them there, we might miss something, right? And I know every county has a little bit different, everybody's county agencies have a different name. So if you're not sure, ask around, see who is in your county and what agency. I know here in Boone County Family Resources is the county that kind of does all of that as students transition to that adult world. Your county has one of those agencies as well. So you may have to research that if you are not familiar with what the name of your county support services is. Now, I probably talked about all of that before we got to the slide. So at your table, do I just hit go, Bailey? Is that how this works? Larry's helping us. Larry, thanks, Larry. At your table, talk for a minute about the agencies that you know, Boone County, I just told you. Who's in your region, in your county? Because, of course, many of the regions have multiple counties, right? So who's in your county? St. Louis County, what agencies are in your county? Jefferson County, Cole County. Okay. Anybody willing to share? Just holler it out. Impact, ha! Is that the Impact folks back there? Hi, Impact folks. Is everybody has an Impact person for their county, is that correct? All right, so if you're not sure who your Impact person is, see those folks back there. Transition, okay. Yeah, if you want to, go at the back. Hey, Impact, raise your hand again.
Impact? Okay, I'm coming to you.
She's coming. Thank you for being my stage manager, Larry. It's normally me, so thank you.
Sorry, you're the closest.
Impact folks.
Missouri Parents Act is the Parent Training Information Center. We are located across the state. So what we do is help parents understand and youth that special education process. But in this subject, we have RTNs, Regional Transitional Networks, across the state, and we're always looking to coordinate to start more. And what we do is, what is the barrier after high school?
Thank you, Impact.
Thank you, Impact.
Who else has anything they want to offer? Getting my steps in, come on. All right, coming to you.
We have several things. We have like Easter seals, we have preferred, we got BR, the independent living centers, family counseling centers. We got some employment services close to our area. We got and transportation, MERS Goodwill, and several other ones.
Awesome. Thank you.
So there's definitely some agencies she mentioned that aren't on our list here. So we certainly could update that. And of course, in your region, it might be called something different. Easter Seals is going to be Easter Seals, right? No matter where you go. Services for Independent Living, does pretty much, I know Boone County has that. Are they in your other regions? Okay. So anything different that's not on here? I see a no. Yep, no, head shake. So yeah. Good, thank you for sharing. And as I said before, beginning with the end in mind. One thing that I started doing, even with the kids that I taught that were likely going to go to a day program, likely going to go to the workshop, is have them say what they wanted to do, right? And they would say it at the very beginning of the meeting. Now, sometimes they'd throw you a curveball and say, I want to be a rock star. And I did have that student. He is successfully working at the workshop to this day. But to have that student sit there and say, I want to go work at the workshop, or I want to work in some sort of retail position, or I want to be fill in the blank. It changes the lens with which you look at that entire IEP that day. And you begin with that end in mind. So if they want to be a person who is a plumber, All right, what do we need to do to help ensure that you will be successfully be a plumber? Right. Job shadow, definitely. So there's nothing that says in any of the DESE paperwork or the federal law that says you can't start with the transition form. Right? You don't have to go page 1, page 2, page 3. So start with the end in mind, and by bringing that form to the front and saying, this is what I want to do, it changes the lens with how you plan that for that IEP, and it changes every time you sit down. Because as you go through what that student has done and what they've successfully completed with that particular IEP, okay, what's next? What's next? What do we need to do so that is concern for this job? Are there any voc techs that have plumbing? Voc techs? How many regions? Raise your hand if you have a voc tech in your region. Excellent. So with that plan to be a plumber, what education are you going to need? Well, my nephew wanted to be a welder. So where did he go? He went to, it's the Votech out there by you, Jeannie. I don't know what it's called. Jefferson something? Jeffco? Right? Went to Jeffco. He wanted to be a welder. He's not a welder, but he wanted to be one. All right? And then they can also say, well, this is where I want to live. And that everything you do, everything you plan will be through that lens of what that student wants to do when he or she graduates, what their goal is. Okay? And don't forget, everything we're doing, so much of what we're doing is via the internet now. So some of that training that we may need to look at, and of course, a lot of kids, they're not technological immigrants like some of us in the room, right? Because how many in this room remember when there was no such a thing as an internet? How many remembers a telephone that went like this? Shh, shh. I was playing with one backstage this weekend, and I was dialing my grandma's phone number. That was so cool. So we need to think about that as well. How will this online world, how will this world via Zoom impact what the student may or may not do, and how they will get to their outcomes, including those online things? Because we all know in this room, most of you know what I look like in a box this big, right? Zoom? What do we need to teach kids about using that platform, Zoom, or an online platform of some kind to get education classes, to have a meeting? Because for a whole year, did we do that? Did we all feel like complete idiots at the beginning of the pandemic when we started using Zoom? You're on mute. How many of you were embarrassed when your cat tail went like this? Mm-hmm. So it might be something that we need to consider. Is this student likely to be doing any of their education, or is their choice of a job likely to have some sort of online component? Any kind of education might have some sort of online component. I was thinking about taking a statistics class, and they're offering it only online. Well, statistics to begin with, but online statistics? That does not sound fun. So our students may need to have some extra training in that area on how to navigate online classes as well, or online jobs. So this is how we used to do it. Does this look familiar? So what if we did it like this? Starting with that measurable post-secondary goal. After high school, I, Johnny, will work as is that a measurable post-secondary goal? Now, Johnny's sitting there saying, I want to do this, I want to be a welder, I want to be a plumber, I want to be a rock star. You start with that. Then what? Then we go to the present level and we discuss all the positives, the strengths that student has, and how will that help that student be successful. And we talk about the deficits that student has and what we might need to do to support that student, right? And then based on that, we know what the strengths are, and now we know what the deficits are. What transition services can we, or do we, or will we put in place the freshman year? And then the sophomore year. Right? And what measurable goals that can we do as far as the IEP goals do we need to put in place that are going to help with that student's transition services, and then stepping back again with the likelihood that that student will be successful in whatever job that is, whatever education that is. All right? So if a student has a disability in reading, yep, there's going to be a reading goal, because how many of us would likely be sitting here if we hadn't had support in reading if we had a disability in reading? Or do anything, really. Because is there anything that we do that doesn't involve reading? Right? And then with those age-appropriate transition assessments, whether they're formal or informal, however you're doing, those are going to tell you, A, what the student wants to do, B, what the student's good at, and also possibly what they're not so good at. So for me, outdoor work, not a good idea. But talking to people, talking to strangers? She's nodding. Yeah. All right. And then tying that all back. What do we need to do this year? What can we do this year to support that student and that goal of being a welder, or working in retail, or being a rock star? Right? And of course, that course of study. Now, granted, most of what is on the course of study we have to put there. But what can we think about? What courses can the student choose? We talked about vocational schools already. So it would make sense. We would expect to see a vocational school, if you have one in your region, we would expect to see that on the plan of study if that student is looking at a job area that is available in your area. So what if I want to be a rock star? What classes might you choose? Choir, band, absolutely. And that makes sense. What else? Business? Communications, maybe? Even marketing might be good. Drama? Drama helped me with what I'm doing right this second. Normally I'm over there. I'm the stage manager. So everything that's available in your school, there's a possibility that even math, right? Is music not based on math? I'm not a music person. So even those things, even though they're required, it is super important for a student to understand the basics of those math concepts in order to be successful as a musician. Now, they may not be a rock star, okay. They might be a TikTok star, I guess. But as you can see, all of it goes back to what the student wants to do, what they're good at, and what deficits do we need to help them with. And this is a transition services flow chart. I mean, I won't necessarily go through the whole thing, but I think it's a good step, a way to step through it, more than just some of the other things that are available out there. Did you write this? Who wrote this? You stole it? Yeah. Okay, we stole it. Good. If you have any questions about this particular, of course, your region person is right there, your effective practices person. All right. Starts at the top, starts with those transition assessments. What does a student want to do? I think I covered a lot of it already. Anything you want to add, Bailey?
No?
Your turn.
Yep.
It says your turn on here.
I know, it does. I had to remember which parts were mine. So Lynn kind of went through the overview, and she went through the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. And so now we're really going to hit hard on those age-appropriate transition assessments. Earlier, Kansas City already kind of discussed some of the challenges that we do have with age-appropriate transition assessments. One being that time is hard to find in school. I was a 6th, 7th, 8th grade life skills teacher, and in the state of Kansas, we had to do transition at age 14. And so I did a lot of transition assessments, and it is a lot of time. But we also talked about how our counselors are doing so many wonderful things already that we can embed within our IEPs, and we can utilize as transition assessments. And so we've got to come together as a team and really remember that this is a team approach. It is not a one-man job. And I say that for you guys because I think you want to hear that. It is not all on the case manager to get these assessments done. It is a team approach. So when we do think about transition, we should think about transition assessments early on. We should be assessing our students. We should be gathering data early and often. So transition assessments should answer 3 main questions. Where is the student currently with their skills related to post-secondary life? Where is the student going? What do they want to do in their post-secondary life? And how do we get that student there? What skills do they need? What can we assist them with within our power at the school level? Now, once again, remember, this is a team approach. So when we're thinking about our IEP team, it's not just the school that's there, right? We also have outside agencies, the student themselves, and parents. This is the one time we can tell parents that we need their help and that they can help us with some things. So hopefully these age-appropriate transition assessments are going to really help drive where we're going and what we're going to do with them. Transition assessments should not be generic. They must properly assess students' readiness for post-secondary education, employment, and, when appropriate, independent living. Now, I must tell you guys, we had the wonderful opportunity to go to the LRP Special Education Conference, and I got to see an amazing transition presentation that was called Transition in the 2020s. And they really talked about educational benefit. And if you haven't heard Desi start talking about this term educational benefit, get ready, because this is something that we're going to be throwing out a lot lately. But we have to ask ourselves, if we give students an assessment without individually thinking about the student's readiness for post-secondary life, why are we assessing them? What is that assessment going to do for them? We really need to think about the individual's needs, preferences, strengths, weaknesses before trying to give them just a random test. So we need to know where they are. We need to be able to give them an age-appropriate assessment that fits them. That may be that we can't just give everybody the same assessment. Missouri Connections has wonderful resources that can be individualized. So everybody could be doing Missouri Connections, but we could individualize it and cater it to the needs of that particular child. So just be cautious of asking yourself, what is it that we're really wanting to gain from that assessment? One thing I see over and over when we review IEP files is I'll see independent living not applicable, or the team has determined that independent living skills are age appropriate. And then I ask the question, how did you guys determine that? And they kind of go, well, we talked it over. Do you have any data to back it up? And it's just like silent. And you can kind of see their eyes get bigger and they kind of dance around the question. If you don't have data to back up what you're saying, you are assuming something. It is an assumption. So you need to make sure that you have transition assessments that can back up that student has those independent living skills that they need in order to be successful in post-secondary life. Transition assessments, once again, is an ongoing process. You heard me say it once, and I'll say it again. This needs to be continuously happening because, as we talked about earlier, kids change their mind, and as they should. They're learning, they're molding, they're being shaped, they're having new experiences happen. You heard me talk about earlier how I got to work at the Rel-Peniston State School. That changed me. And it changed me for the better. I loved it. I loved working with those kids. And as soon as I got to work with students with disabilities, I knew that that was my calling. But until I had that experience, I had never even thought about teaching special education. So kids have the right to change their mind. Therefore, we do need to make sure we're doing ongoing data collection that looks at their strengths, their preferences, their needs, and their interests. From there, we should look at the tools that are going to go towards that student's future and connect it to that transition process, looking at Form C, creating those goals, looking at the present levels. And it's going to be that cycle. So then the next year, we should be doing it all again. We should never stop looking at where the kids are and where they're wanting to go. So you know me, I like activities. So I got another one for you. You see that on your tables there are some Post-it notes. If there's not Post-its, they should be in your vanilla or your envelope there. And I want you guys to just take 1 minute and I want you to write down all the transition assessments that your school district uses. So I want you to think about it. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to think. Larry, if you want to put a minute on the timer for me. And it's just you thinking and writing. And then once that minute's up, we're going to have some table talk time where you guys can kind of see what other districts in your areas are doing. All right, go for it. All right, Lynn, if you want to walk around, if somebody wants to yell out or shout out a transition assessment that they are using in their district, Lynn will come around and maybe it's something that you guys haven't thought about. Oh, we got one in the back, Lynn. Impact.
Is this what? Is this on? Is this on? Ooh, I should have used this. I like it better.
Missouri Connections.
Missouri Connections. Raise your hand if you're using Missouri Connections. All right, everybody should be using Missouri Connections because that is an amazing resource.
And ABAF.
ABAF? Anybody using ABAF?
Oh, wait, S. I meant ABAS.
ABAS. Okay, I was going to say, I haven't heard about ABAF, but ABAS. All right. Anybody else have another resource?
Reading Free Inventory.
Okay, Reading Free Inventory.
And Career Inventory.
And Career Inventories. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Here for Dakota.
Anybody else? Come on, be brave. Okay, we got some up front. Springfield and Northeast both raised their hands. TPI. TPI is a really great resource. Missouri Connections, I know, is free. TPI, is it free? I believe it does cost a little money.
Life-centered education knowledge battery, and I do that at 9th grade, and then I do it again at 11th grade.
Perfect.
At the old LCC.
Anybody else? Oh, yep, Springfield over here. Pre-ETS. Pre-ETS comes in and helps. Yep. Anyone else? Yes. ONET. O, and there's a little star, and then NET. ONET. Yes, that's a great resource. Anyone else?
Region 2 representing over here.
The ARC self-determination scale, we've used that a couple times.
Awesome.
ARC self-determination scale. Anybody familiar with that?
Okay. Can you see over here is? So the reason why we do this, guys, is so that you guys can learn some new transition assessments. Hopefully, during the Transition Training Institute, you guys will be able to attend more sessions on transition assessments. I know I'm saying transition assessments a lot, but and you can get a whole nother round of great tools for your toolbox. Yes.
So I'm supposed to give a shameless plug for our friends here who are doing the session tomorrow, Transition Assessments and Activities in Windsor 4.
Perfect. So if you would like to know more, please attend Windsor 4 Transition Assessments.
It's 11 o'clock.
Awesome.
Oh, and she says lots of free. I assume that's free. Oh, she's cheap. Okay. So free things to share with you.
So some other transition assessments that you may have wrote down on your sticky notes. Maybe you wrote down some inventories, interest inventories, academic achievement assessments. There's a lot of good stuff in there when you're doing your 3-year reevals. Intellectual or cognitive assessments. Those can also give you a great deal of information. Language assessments, adaptive behavior scales, aptitude tests, such as the ASVAB. That's a great one if you have any students that are thinking about going into the military. Interest inventories, physical assessments such as OT, PT, sensory, observational learning styles, curriculum-based assessments, just good old observations in general. They can give you some good information. Role play situations, job tryouts, interviews, questionnaires. I will say with interviews, please be mindful of the questions that you are asking. Have them pre-made, pre-planned. Make sure you are hitting all the things that you are wanting. Nothing makes me more get this crazy weird twitch in my eye when I see a informal interview conducted on 2/23/2022. Student said he wants to be a farmer, and that's it. That's all I have. I have no other information on what that interview had. I don't know why he wants to be a farmer. I don't know what he's interested in farming. Is it animals? Is it crops? I don't know how he's gonna, skills that he has. I don't know what he wants, if he wants to, go to school and get an ag degree, or if he wants to, go and be an apprentice, learn the trade from a farmer. I don't know if he's already in some type of program. You have to make sure if you're doing an informal interview that you have questions, really good, strong questions to really give you solid information. Missouri Connections, again and again, you're going to hear me say it because it is a great resource that is free. I believe almost all the RPDCs also have counseling consultants that are in charge of the Missouri Connections. You can also reach out to any of us consultants and we can surely help you with that. Yes. Perfect. Thank you. It's under Career Advisors on the DESE website. So if you go to the DESE website and you look under the Career Advisors, they actually have each region and they have who you can contact. It is a great resource. I know in our area this last year we did put on a quick little 2-hour webinar on how to use Missouri Connections with transition assessments for students with disabilities. And so I do know that our career advisors are working hard to make sure that our special education educators can really utilize that website. You heard Lynn talk about it a little earlier. I also want to say once again, really think about assistive technology, okay? Because it's not just does the student need assistive technology in the education setting, but also out in the community, out in post-secondary life. There are many times where a student may need an assistive technology device, maybe for communication purposes. IEP teams need to consider if a student may be able to participate in an online class. Len was talking about that earlier. We now are doing Zoom land, right? Can students actively participate in Zoom without assistive technology? Can they work in an online environment? Think about how many jobs has switched to virtual. My husband was one that he no longer has to go into the office. He gets to sit in his PJs all day and answer the phone and do things at home. He loves it. He does miss people, though. But I will tell you that so many jobs, because of COVID, has switched virtual, and they're not going back. It's better for companies because it's a lot less money. They don't have to sit there and have a big, expensive business that they have to operate and run. So could a student with a disability, could that individual do that job virtually with or without assistive technology? Teams need to have that consideration. Students may need AT for completing transition assessments, accomplishing functional tasks in the community, employment settings, and independent living. And also, they may need assistive technology to access higher education settings. So also another thing to consider. I'm going to give you guys a little time, and if you have questions, we have our consultants. I want you to think about, is there any questions that you have based around transition? I'll give you about 2 minutes. Larry, put 2 minutes on the clock for me, please. I love Larry. I want Larry just to come to my house and do this. He's doing an amazing job today. Okay, so everybody just talk to each other. What questions do you have about transition assessments, and maybe we can answer those right here for you, and we have our compliance consultants to help. Go. Coming to you. All right, do we have any big questions that we need answers to? Okay, so her question is a good one, and I'm looking for advice because you all are experts in your field. She says, I have some MAP A students who are doing pictorial inventories. And when they do these pictorial inventories, I'm finding out that their answers are different every single time. What do I do for the best way to gather information on these students? So who is our MAP A experts in the room? Does anybody have some good advice? Oh, I got somebody over here.
I'm not a super big expert, but what we always did in that kind of situation, because we have a few, we would kind of do it over a long period of time, and in their day-to-day lessons and their day-to-day free times, what are the things that they're doing that is often, like my particular student loves music, so his free time is always something musical. So that is where we always try to turn his transitions towards, and then we would talk to the parents and get their input, and we would work together from that.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, we got one that's piggybacking off of it. Here we go.
On the topic of MAP A, so I will have life skills students. What is a good transition assessment to use for MAP A?
So she asked, what are some good transition assessments to even use for MAP A for our more severely cognitive students? The Zorro Institute has significant disability resources. So Zorro Institute is a great resource, I'm hearing, from Warrensburg that can assist you. We have also, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar or not, but DESE last year put on bi-monthly Zoom meetings where we hit on different special education compliance hot topics. One of those big hot topics was transition assessments. Now, I will tell you, you're going to see my face on there again because I'm the one that did that training. However, on that, the virtual resource page on DESE, if you click on it, there is a question and answer page. And there is that same question as to what transition assessments are available for students with significant disabilities, and we do answer it. I wish I had the answer right in front of me. I just cannot remember what they said. We did speak with the Missouri State Schools, and they were the ones that assisted us with finding those resources. So once again, if you go to DESE's Special Education Compliance Resources and you scroll down to topic resources, click on transition assessments, and you will find not only the PowerPoint presentation, but also the video. You can share that with your teammates. And then there's also a Q&A session, question and answers from that session. And once again, that question is being answered. Anything else? Okie dokie. Hold on. I know that wasn't very ladylike, but you know, I'm in pants. Okay, one other question that I usually get with transition assessments is, when do we need consent? Anybody have that question being answered? Question? I was waiting for somebody to say it here. Consent is not needed when using assessments that are used for all students in a classroom. If they're enrolled in a course or at grade level, in building or in district or at the state level, they are not needed. For teachers to collect anecdotal information during the course of instruction, such as classroom discussions, group activities, individual assignments that explore employment, education, training, and independent living, when you're just talking to parents about preparing parent questionnaires, consent is not needed, okay? Consent is needed when we are individually taking that student out of the classroom and doing an assessment with just them, okay? So there's many, many times where we do not need that consent. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton off to Lisa.
And I'm Lisa Day, and I'm the South Central out of Rolla compliance consultant. So now you've got these awesome assessments that you've done, and you are ready to actually start getting into writing your present level. One of the places that those transition assessments information shows up is in that section of the present level, and they're also the guide in writing those goals and all those things that your student needs to know. Let's see. Okay. I'm lost. Okay. Now I'm in the right place. Okay, so here's a good example of just a generic what you might see in a present level. And think about a student. I'm thinking about a student that we had at our high school. And we, by the way, were in a very small district that I retired from. And he wanted to be a car salesman. So our thinking about some of the issues that he had awesome social skills. He had awesome support at home, but really weak math skills. So just thinking about if you were going to be a car salesman, you probably need at least some good money math skills. His reading skills were not that great. And you think about contracts that they have to read, information, just basic information they have to share with clients, potential customers. So those were some of the things that I just think big picture that we would start to think about with him when we wrote the present level. And then let's look at some very specific examples for you. Okay, so this is the example of Scout. And first of all, by reading present level, we learn all kinds of stuff about Scout. Like we learn that he's eligible under the category of autism. We know that he wants to work in a restaurant, and we learned that from those transition assessments that we did. And so you're already thinking, a student with autism and working in a restaurant, there might be some challenges that he would face there. He has difficulty with reading text, and again, we know this from working with him in the classroom, from the formal type assessments that we've done in the classroom, not just transition assessments, but we just know that he struggles with reading and that he's going to need some on-the-job training to reach those post-secondary goals of working in a restaurant. And then he has difficulty in the social skills area. needs help managing his money. And again, we've learned all this stuff from those transition assessments. If we didn't have good transition assessments, we wouldn't know all these things about Scout that we could put in that present level. Remember, that present level needs to pass the stranger test. If Scout transfers to another district, that district shouldn't have to wonder. They shouldn't have to start from scratch. Really, what you send ought to tell them where to begin or where Scout is in the transition process. Okay, so a little bit more about the sections that are in the present level, the strengths in there. And one of the things I like to say about the strengths is make sure every student has strengths, even if it's a relative strength. And sometimes this is the only place in the IEP where we get to talk about what that student does well. So really make sure that you give some attention to that. And then make sure that you are hitting those parent concerns. For example, we read here, we know that mom says he's got trouble maintaining his living space. And you're thinking, what teenager doesn't, right? I know the teenager I used to have in my house had trouble with that, and she didn't have a disability. My husband has trouble with that. He doesn't have a disability. She was concerned that he would be safe. She knows that he's going to need help managing his medication and that he needs a plan for getting to work. So it may be that Scout doesn't ever get a driver's license, so he needs to learn how to manage public transportation. So you get a treasure trove just from the parent concerns. Are you seeing some good ideas there for what you might have some post-secondary goals based on? Maybe his independent living goal needs to be some sort of coming up with a management plan for his medication. Maybe he is capable of getting a driver's license, and that might be his independent living goal, is getting his driver's license. So notice that every section in the present level has that little prompt about if the child has a transition plan. So use those prompts to remind you of what to put in there. And this particular example that I've given you actually goes through each part. There isn't one right way to do this. If we look at the example of Travis in the present level, it's broken down into little sections that are labeled. And what I like about that is you don't have to guess about what each one of those parts are talking about. And if we look at Travis, we know from reading his present level that he wants to work in the automotive field. He wants to live on his own. He needs reading and math skills, but they're both deficits for him. He struggles with verbal, multi-step directions, and he's just a nice guy that doesn't like confrontation. So, you know, there's a concern there that people might take advantage of him. He needs some help with self-advocacy. So all this information provides us a framework for where we go with his post-secondary goals, where we go with his annual IEP goals, and you just get some really good ideas here. A little bit more about Travis. If you look at his changes in current functioning, it really addresses how they're directly connected to his post-secondary goals. That he has become a better reader, and his increased math skills are all helping him get closer to that working in the automotive field. And then in the transition assessments, notice that they're written in parent-friendly words. A lot of times we're guilty of just putting the lingo down in the present level, but it doesn't really mean anything to anyone but us or school people. So if you look about halfway down through there, it says the response choices are like very much, like, dislike, or not sure. And these really help a parent. If you said to a parent he scored in the didn't like very much category, they would understand what that meant. So just make sure that you are doing that. And then notice this one also has an interview that helps you nail down that piece, because if you see his career clusters, how broad those are, but by doing an interview, you get to that, down to that piece of wanting to work in the automotive industry. You wouldn't have necessarily gotten that just from the broad career cluster transitions. Okay, so hopefully you brought your own IEP with you. And if you didn't, you can log into the Google Slides, Or we actually have some samples up here. Does anybody need some sample IEPs to look at, or do you all have access to them? Okay, so you're looking at either the IEP that you brought with you or one of the samples the gals are bringing around, or you've logged in and found them in our Google folder. First of all, find out where there are statements that address post-secondary transition in some way. Best practice would be that you would find them in each one of the sections. So are you finding in that first section where you're telling the story of the student that talks about transition in any way at all? Whoever's reading shouldn't have to guess that that's what you're talking about. And then, is there anything that you could add? Are you seeing, okay, I could make this better. I could tell a little bit more about this student. If it were someone that wasn't familiar with the student, would they know what I'm talking about? Would they know about this student? Would they know what they want to be when they grow up? Would they know where they have deficits? Would they know what their strengths are? Those kinds of things. Okay, and then I've already said it would be best practice to address that in each section, but at a minimum, at an absolute minimum, the information needs to be in the transition assessment section. So do you at least have it there in the IEP that you're looking at? Does it talk about their strengths, their needs, their preferences, and their interest? I've actually looked at IEPs out in file reviews in my districts where it'll say something like, student has a transition plan. And that's all it says. So I hope you're not looking at an IEP like that. Or as in Bailey mentioned before, it might say, you know, they want to be a farmer and you don't know anything else besides that. So you really need to have that comprehensive piece in there. Because remember, the present level is what's driving the rest of your IEP. So if you don't have this information, where might you get it? So would you get it from transition assessments? Would you get it from talking to the student? Would you get it from talking to the parent? Teachers? There's all sorts of sources for finding this information. And we will return to Scout and Travis a little bit later, but I think next Lynn is going to talk to you about goals.
Before we get going on goals, does anybody have anything that they want to add to this, to that present levels? Anything that they saw, an aha moment? Oh, yes, coming back to you.
Thank you. I have a question. It's not, it's relevant, but it's not in any of these scenarios. So at Impact, we have a Justice Involved initiative. And so I'm thinking, what if you have a student who has a disability and then they have involvement in the juvenile justice system and you're working on this present level, you're talking about transition, their involvement is going to impact their post-secondary goals, employment, independent living. So how would that be addressed in the present level or in those when you're creating that those transition plans?
Oh, Jeannie has the answer. Give us a second.
Okay, so I think what you have to remember is post-secondary planning is future. And I understand what you're saying. This kid's future is somewhat limited. I mean, his near future is somewhat limited. So I think you plan beyond that, okay? A lot of what you're talking about is, okay, you're in the juvenile system, God willing, you're going to be out of that mess and you're going to move on. And what are you going to want to do with your life when you move on? What's that going to look like? What kind of education and training are you going to need? I do think, we were just talking about it at our table, that if these kids have difficulty with some of these social skills, if some of those behaviors are what's getting in the way of what we all know is going to make them successful, we can have conversations about that at the IEP table about, okay, so what are some of the things that might hinder you from being this welder that you want to be at some point in your life? What are some of the things that hinder you? Let's talk about what it looks like. It looks like showing up to a job on time. Do you show up to school every day? Well, no. Do you show up on time when you come? Well, no. Are those some things we need to work on? Yes, probably. So that kind of stuff can end up in the present level without saying this kid never comes to school, never shows up on time. It's all in how you verbalize it in that IEP. But you're really thinking beyond. I usually say, let's think 5 years out. Where do you want to be 5 years after you graduate from high school? What would you like to be doing? Because now we're settled. Now if we were going to do those gap years and all that stuff, we've done all that. 5 years out, what do you want your life to look like? And plan to that point. And then there's no requirement to do that, okay? So I didn't say, Desi said you have to do 5 years out. I didn't say that. But that gets you past some of that craziness after school, after they graduate and they don't know what they want to do. What would you like to be doing 5 years from now? And think that way with some of your kids that have troubled situations at the moment.
Thank you. I love Jeannie. She always has an answer.
Jeannie's my favorite.
Anybody else have anything on present levels before we move on? Hopefully your present levels look good. Hopefully you are talking about transition throughout. We're hitting on independent living. We're hitting on education, employment, and training. All right, Lynn, you're up.
Okay, so sorry I stepped out. I did go speak to the folks up front, and they were going to send whoever's working on the internet for us, because I know many of you have said to me, I can't get on, or I keep getting kicked off. So someone is supposed to be coming in and doing something to help us with that issue. So that's why I stepped out. Okay? So Lisa and you all were having a conversation about the present level. So what comes out of the present levels? Right? If we go back to what I was saying earlier, we were talking about that post-secondary goal and all that information that comes from the present levels, and then what are we doing with it, right? We're talking about what they can do, where the deficits are, and we're going to plan on what we need to do to support them. One of the biggest things that we see is writing those measurable post-secondary goals. And a little bit ago, I said it for you. It's really this simple. One of the things that we do is we make this too hard. So let's write a post-secondary, measurable post-secondary goal. You want to start with education or training? What'd you say? Let's do education, Dana says. You ready? Now, this is just a sample. This is not the one and only way to write a transition goal, a measurable post-secondary goal, but it is this simple, really. After high school, Dana, will go to school to be a. What we do with writing post-secondary goals is really not more difficult than that, right? The employment goal is something as simple as I will work as a. So it has to happen after high school. Now we do know that DESI's forms and any of the companies that you use will have that goal stem. It'll say after high school I, right? And it populates the name for you, so that's good. That's your specific, part of your specifics. And each one will be, whether it's education or employment. Now the form does have employment first, right? I will do something. I will work as a. Now we know what that student wants to do because they're going to tell us through whether it's a formal or informal type of assessment, whether it's what we've done through the classroom, through Missouri Connections throughout the year, all of the assessment or the training or the classroom stuff that we've done throughout the year, if we have them in a class, so we know what their preferences are, we know what their interests are. If my post-secondary goal had been what I planned to be, my post-secondary goal will be, after high school, Lynn will work as a stage manager. So I wanted to go to school and do theater. Clearly not where I ended up. But that would have been my goal. I will go to school to be a stage manager. I will work as a stage manager. Okay? So he doesn't want to pick something? Is that what you're saying?
He does not know, and he will not pick until he does. No, he will not pick.
So she has a student with autism who answers things very black and white and does not want to answer a question because they do not know.
Hand that microphone right over there to Jeannie.
Where is Jeannie? Oh, there she is.
I saw that hand.
Yeah, I would probably say, tell me something you like. What's your favorite thing to do? And then I would say, okay, so your favorite thing to do is to look at car magazines. Let's say that maybe you want to be you want to do something with cars. And so I would make that employment goal somewhat generic to the point of Johnny, after high school, Johnny, will work with cars, and leave it at that. And then next year when you review it, you say, do you still want to work with cars? What do you like now? Yeah, I'd be very generic with it in that regard. You what? Well, I was just going to say, listen, okay, buddy, I got to do this for my job, so I'm I don't want to get fired. I'm writing this on here. No, you have to do the best you can with it. And if it's something that he's interested in, you just say, okay, well, let's pretend like you're going to be that, and then you can change it whenever you want to. It's all about how you massage it.
That's exactly what I was going to say, massage that situation. We often, I've seen many times, will work as a this or a that because the student doesn't want to pick. Have that conversation with that kid. I understand that you're not sure what you'd want to do, but as the person who has to write this paperwork, please, we just have to pick one. And if that's not what you end up doing and you change your mind, we'll change it, not a big deal. But I think with a lot of kids, if we explain, I understand this, you don't know for sure, but I have to pick one for my job, like Jeannie said, and because you do. If it says we'll work as a this or a that, that's out of compliance. It's not specific, right? So it's also not the job that they're going to do while they're in college. It's what they're going to do after the education is done. So if I'm going to work at, say, McDonald's while I'm in college, that's all fine and dandy, but that's not what my post-secondary plan is. My post-secondary plan was to be a stage manager, right? So what I do to support myself or to make that money to eat while I'm in college, right? So we have to think that long-term planning, not just what we're going to do while we're in college or getting that on-the-job training. And that's okay. I will get on-the-job training to be a car mechanic. That is a perfectly acceptable way to address education, on-the-job training. And some kids may not do some sort of competitive employment, and their post-secondary outcome might be something like a volunteer position. And that's okay too. Is that a hand up or are you waving? Okay. And here's the formula. I will work as a what? I will go to school to be a what? Just fill in the blanks. We often make it much more difficult than it is. Okay? All right, so let's look at some examples. Here's Jeannie's rose and garlic. We always use the rose and the garlic. Okay? So there should be some goals on strips of paper in an envelope. Organize those goals, take them out, there's some strips in there. Organize into the roses and the onion. I guess that's an onion, sorry. Roses and onions. Looks like a garlic clove, head of garlic to me. So either way. So I think there's actually a picture of a rose and a garlic or an onion, so you can separate those out. Bailey, how long do you think? How many is there? Yeah, yeah. If you get them organized and you want Bailey to come over or Lisa to come over and look at what you've got, just raise your hand. If you have a question, we'll just give you a couple minutes, 5 minutes to do this. Okay, so the timer has gone off. Are y'all ready to discuss it? Show of hands if you need more time. Think we're good? Let's go. All right, so these are the roses. You want to take a quick look? I know that some of the folks that I looked at theirs, I kind of gave them some of my thoughts. These are the ones that we are saying are the roses. I will attend Mizzou to get a degree in engineering. It doesn't have to say Mizzou. It doesn't have to say four-year college. But I will get a degree in engineering. I will serve in the Marines. Some people serve in the Marines for their entire career, right? What kind of education is that? If I serve in the Marines as my career, what education is that? On-the-job training, absolutely. I'll work as a high school math teacher. I will be employed as a conservation agent. Any that you disagree with up here?
We had one group talk about the Marines. They said, can we leave it more vague? Or do we
what would be vague about it?
Do we have to name the branch?
Oh, no.
And I said, that's exactly what I said. I said, no, you don't have to necessarily name the branch, but you can. It all depends on the individual student. Yes?
What branch? So it might start out generic, and the same thing with just about anything. If the kid thinks they want to do something in the healthcare profession, but they don't know what they want to do, as a freshman, I will work in the healthcare profession is fine. By the time they get to be a senior, we should have helped them narrow that down to what it is you specifically want to do. And the same thing applies to the armed forces. By the time you're a senior, you better know, because you should have already applied and you should have been accepted into one of those and all that kind of stuff.
So which one did I have on the board? Because I was reading off here, but what was on the board was, did I have the stinky ones up or did I have the good ones?
You had the roses.
I had the roses up? Okay, so the stinky ones?
And the other one I saw that a lot of people had to really think about was this: after high school, I will find a job doing yard work. Find. Think about that verb.
So finding the job is actually part of the process. Okay? Pursuing a degree is part of the process, right?
So instead, it would be, I will be employed in the field of landscaping or something to that degree.
What do you think about the second one? What's the stinky part of that one? That's exactly right. What you said is it's what's happening while they're in college as opposed to what they're doing after college. So if I were going to work at Walmart for my career, then it would say I will work at Walmart or I will work in retail. But in this case, it's I will work at Walmart while in college. And what students are doing to feed themselves or their Friday night activities at Walmart during college is not the goal here. The goal is, what if they're in college, what field are they getting that degree in? So I will work as a. So if they're getting a degree in engineering, I will work as an engineer or environmental engineer or something to that effect, whatever area that they're working on. Okay, so it's while in college is the issue with this particular one. All right, so I understand we're supposed to have a break between 3 and 3:15. Is that the correct time frame? And I know folks were asking about that. So right now it is literally exactly 3 o'clock. So we'll see you back and we'll finish up this section real quick. All right, so take 15, everyone. Okay, can we have a 15, please? That's for me more than anybody. Thank you.